Good evening, everyone. Happy cold Tuesday evening to those watching on Facebook, on YouTube, or maybe tuning in after the fact. Hopefully it's not cold anymore. I don't know. Here on Tuesday, February 9th, it certainly is a bit chilly in the Waukesha and Milwaukee areas, but we are gladly warm. I am here at the Waukesha County Historical Society. And we've got with us this evening Peter Zanghi from the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I see we've got some folks tuning in. We'll give everyone an opportunity to pull up their Facebook page, whether it's the Waukesha County page, the Preservation Alliance page, or again on YouTube that you might be watching. We've got multiple channels all going at once. We've started to figure out this live streaming thing a few months in here. For those who may be returning, thank you for supporting our speaker series program here at the Waukesha County Historical Society. I am the director for the Historic Society, Bonnie Bird, and the programming that we've been able to do over the last months really is because of the support of our community, you all's interest, and us wanting to connect with other area organizations who, like us, have been trying to find new ways to reach the community with the work that we do, even when we're not able to see you in person as easily. For those who are familiar with the Waukesha County Historic Society, you may know that we recently, or at least in recent memory, did our own building rehabilitation and renovation, partnering with local developers and partners to restore the building that we call home here at 101 West Main Street in Waukesha, the old historic courthouse building. And our project was one of adaptive reuse for an historic structure. That this building hasn't been the courthouse and hasn't been a jail since the 1950s. It's always been home for our organization, but we needed to find a new way to utilize it and really give it a second life with a new stated purpose in mind, and a lot of really dedicated folks along the way. And so we have, since our project has now completed, wanted to connect with more organizations doing preservation work in the region. And so that led us to kind of starting to follow this project we kept hearing about just down 94, the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance really adopting the Soldiers Home. For those who are familiar with that site, you might go biking by it. I know a lot of folks know it from its proximity to the bike trail, but another project that is about taking an historic site in our region and giving it new life through rehabilitation and by working with community and working with key partners to find the right adaptive reuse for it. So I'm really excited to be hosting Peter this evening. Again, he is the president of the board for the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. And looks like we've got a pretty good audience, so I will duck out of here, Peter, and turn it over to you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. I appreciate it. Like you said, I'm Peter Zanghi, president of the board of the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. Just here to talk to you tonight about the Soldiers Home. So I'd like to welcome you all on this frigid February evening. Wanted to take a minute just to tell you about our organization if you're not familiar with us. So the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, or MPA, we're a nonprofit organization that the community is the community voice for historic preservation advocacy in Milwaukee. We educate residents, property owners, and decision makers about the many benefits of preserving and reusing our older and historic buildings and connect them with resources to help make preservation possible. We partnered with the National Trust for Historic Preservation about a decade ago to find preservation solutions for some of the buildings on the Soldiers Home grounds that have been vacant for decades. That effort, which we called Save the Soldiers Home, has seen incredible success, and I'm excited to share some of that as well as our ongoing efforts with you tonight. But first, let's start with the all-important question, which is, what is the Soldiers Home? So if we were doing this in person, I'd ask for a raise of hands, but I can't see you, of course. But it'd be interesting to know how many of you are familiar with the Soldiers Home. And while perhaps some of you who are tuning in, you're into this because you like history, a lot of people in Milwaukee simply just don't know that the Soldiers Home even exists. And I myself, up until about 12 years ago, I had no idea either. And I just kind of read about it in a couple news articles, and that it was endangered. And that's actually how I got involved with the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. But it's really neat because when you're there, it feels very secluded. It almost feels like you're kind of in the North Woods or something. But it's right behind Miller Park, as you can see from the arch over the trees. I guess now American Family Field, RIP. It's right, really, just a few miles west of downtown. And so it's kind of in the middle of everything. Yet when you're there, it's just this very serene, very peaceful place. And if you haven't walked through it, I really encourage you to. Even though it's VA land, and sometimes you can maybe feel like, oh, I shouldn't be here. It's public grounds. And so, as long as you're respectful of those who are there and those who are living on the grounds, it is absolutely open to the public to just enjoy. So moving on here, you may have seen the Tower of Old Main peeking out from above the trees from I-94, or if you're in the Brewer Stadium parking lot, you can kind of see this big Gothic-looking tower that's peeking over the dome. So the Soldiers Home is actually 90-plus acre National Historic Landmark District. So there's only, as of today, or as of last month, I guess, the news came out today that there's now a 44th National Historic Landmark in Wisconsin, which is the UW-Madison Arboretum. This one was dedicated as a National Historic Landmark District in 2011. So this one, there's only about 2,600 National Historic Landmarks across the country. To have a district is even more rare. So basically, since this is federally owned property, having it designated as a federal National Historic Landmark actually, in this case, provided protections for the grounds, which would be different if it was owned by the city or something else. But in this case, that provided the protection, and that kind of was the impetus for this entire Save the Soldiers Home campaign to take place. Because at the time, when the VA was kind of considering what to do with them, Old Main had actually been vacant since 1989, and a number of the other properties were vacant as well. And so there was kind of discussion on what do we do with them, and there was serious consideration to tear them down. And so that's when the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance stepped in, partnered with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They brought national attention to it by naming it an 11 most endangered building back in 2010, and then declared it to be a national treasure. And then from there, we were able to submit the nomination for it to be a National Historic Landmark District. So that's some of the background on just kind of the preservation side. So really, from the very beginning, this has been created to service veterans. That is the whole point of the project. That's the whole point of this being here, is really just to serve veterans. And it's got a really neat history about why it's even here. So back when the Civil War was going on, there wasn't any really formal system for taking care of wounded soldiers. The VA didn't exist yet. There was just kind of local groups taking care of soldiers on their own. And in Milwaukee, there was what was called the West Side Soldiers Aid Society. So what they were was a group of women that took care of wounded soldiers returning home from the Civil War. And they just took it upon themselves to care for them, and originally did it in some storefronts in downtown Milwaukee before the Soldiers Home existed. And just quickly here, this is an overview, an aerial of what the Soldiers Home looked like about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So some of the rehab work has taken place in some of these buildings since then. But this is the majority of the district here. Kind of up in the center is where Old Main is. Behind it, this is the barracks building. Behind that is the hospital. This white building here is the old tuberculosis ward. There was another one where this parking lot is here that was demolished. I'm not sure what year, but this is all kind of a connected corridor here. Down here in the left corner, this is currently an outpatient facility for mental health. It was built as a hospital in the 40s, and then it served as a domiciliary, which is essentially a place for people to live after Old Main closed in 1989. This building here with the green roof, which has since been re-roofed, is the theater. And then up here on the right, top right, this is the chapel. And so that's, and then here is the administration building. So Old Main and the administration building house the majority of the homeless veteran housing units that we'll get to later in the presentation. And then there's a few other homes kind of scattered throughout the grounds that are also part of that project. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's a historic view of what the grounds used to look like. So kind of down in this part here is where County Stadium and then Miller Park was built, and I believe the VA actually sold them that land. And then there was I believe there was over to the right here a large Cream City brick making plant there. So this is kind of what it looked like. It was way out in the country at the time. There's a streetcar line that ran from downtown Milwaukee to get out here, and there was a Milwaukee Road line that went from downtown Milwaukee to the Soldiers Home, to Waukesha, and then out to Prairie du Chien. And so the what is now the Hank Aaron State Trail was that old railroad line. And if you've ever ridden on that trail, you've likely ridden through the Soldiers Home grounds. So getting back to the history of why it's here. So this group of women in what was called the West Side Soldiers Aid Society, they actually raised in what was called the Soldiers Home Fair over $100,000 back in the summer of 1865, which is currently about $1.5 million today's dollars. And what they were able to do with that is when Abraham Lincoln signed a piece of legislation, which is one of the last acts that he actually signed before he died, was to establish a system of soldiers' homes. And the reason that the northwestern branch of the Soldiers Home was established in Milwaukee was because that there was already this money raised. And so some local politicians and businessmen from Milwaukee lobbied Congress to establish the northwestern branch here. Instead of Chicago, for instance, and the other two were in Dayton, Ohio, and Togus, Maine. So Milwaukee is one of the 3 original Soldiers Homes, and it's actually the most intact of all of the Soldiers Homes. There ended up being 11 in total that were built. So a number of them are now part of current VA campuses. And again, those predated the Veterans Administration. So the reason that the Milwaukee VA is where it is located now is because it is on grounds that were part of the Soldiers Home. And also a fun fact is that National Avenue, which is, of course, a major east-west corridor in the Milwaukee area, was actually named for the National Soldiers Home. And one thing I should have pointed out here is Lake Wheeler. So this is kind of the last lake that's remaining on the grounds. It actually was moved, I believe, in the 60s. So it's not in its original location, but there used to be 4 artificial lakes and ponds in the grounds. And this was done intentionally to just kind of give a therapeutic atmosphere for the people living at the grounds. The entire landscape was actually designed by a landscape architect named Thomas Bud Van Horn. And I think it's really interesting that even back in the 1860s, they understood the benefits of just being in nature and being in a natural environment, and how that just really helps you recuperate. So a lot of that still exists to this day. If you walk around the grounds, it's still very picturesque. Everything is kind of meant to focus on Old Main as the highest point on the grounds. But this is just kind of a fun photo that just shows people recreating there. And another interesting fact is that before there was a formal county park system, there was a city park system that's a little bit older, but there really weren't any other parks that were of this size. I believe the oldest park in the city is Cathedral Square, which was formerly Courthouse Square downtown. But this was really Milwaukee's first major park. And so there's postcards that you can find online of people, just dozens of people everywhere, just recreating and having picnics, and there's a bandstand and everything. So it's kind of a get out of the city escape on the weekend. So it's kind of cool. So we talked about the Soldiers Home Fair. So this is a pretty neat quote from Abe Lincoln. I think it's really something that should be noted in how he handled this situation, knowing that there's going to be, unfortunately, a lot of casualties from this Civil War that had to be fought. And so instead of just, kind of letting other people figure it out, he really took charge, and he established this national home of volunteer soldiers. And I think it's just a really great testament to veteran care nationally. And it's kind of neat when you walk through the grounds here, you can literally see the entire legacy or lineage of veteran care just by walking around the buildings and just seeing how they evolved, all the way from the oldest building was built in 1867, or I'm sorry, 1869. That's when Old Main opened, and you can view buildings really all the way to the present day if you go outside of the historic district. So 1866, the federal government began selecting sites, and then, as I said, local businessmen and politicians, they lobbied for a branch in Milwaukee. So at the time, it was near the city of Wauwatosa, and then in May of 1867, about 60 soldiers moved from the West Side Soldiers Aid Society's temporary operations downtown into the existing Soldiers Home grounds. Just another nice photo that just kind of shows you. It's really cool to see all the mature trees and everything there too. It's just really pretty. So once it gets a little bit warmer out, I definitely recommend taking a little stroll out there. So here's one of the postcards I was talking about, just showing people just hanging out and enjoying the grounds. And here is the fountain. So this is a recent photo. This fountain was restored in, I believe, 93 or 95. It's original to the building. Or I should say it's not original, but it was, I believe it was built back during the Works Progress Administration era in the 30s. But that's really one of the kind of more interesting features of the grounds. It's still turned on in the summer and really pretty. So this is Wood National Cemetery here. So this is originally known as the Soldiers Home Cemetery, and it opened in 1871. You can also see this from I-94. If you're driving just west of Miller Park, on either side of you, there's a cemetery. So on your south side or on your left, if you're going west, that would be the Soldiers Home Cemetery. And on the other side, that is actually, I believe it used to be the same cemetery, and it's now, there's Calvary over there, and then I believe another cemetery that was also a military cemetery. And then originally, before I-94 was built, it was just really kind of a very small road in between, and then they kind of had to kind of just ram I-94 through there. But that is what you'll see when you drive through. And like the rest of the landscape, the cemetery was designed by the same landscape architect, designed obviously similar as Arlington National Cemetery, and just really kind of brings this sense of tranquility and serenity, and also unity in that the headstones are all the same size and shape. So today there's over 37,000 graves, and they're visible from almost every building on the Soldiers Home grounds. And it serves as a final resting place for veterans from every conflict except for the American Revolution. And I believe the last veteran who was buried there was in 2004, a local woman who is part of the Iraqi Freedom Mission. So this is a photo of one of the towers at the Soldiers Home looking south. In the top here, you can see the Milwaukee Medical Center. So over the years, some of the aspects of the Soldiers Home, they've changed. And for example, one of the districts or some of the district contained farmland, some greenhouses, and then I mentioned there was 4 lakes. But despite all the changes, there's really one of the things that make the Milwaukee Soldiers Home unique is that it's the only Soldiers Home to still include all of its or most of its original buildings and still has a village-like feel. So there's currently about 42 historic resources, including large institutional buildings, I mentioned the theater, the chapel, homes, and garages, and then and today the district covers more than 90 acres. So again, this is the overview of the grounds. So Old Main, clearly the most prominent building on the grounds. It was one of the first, not technically the first building to open up. Originally, it was just the central tower here that was built along with some of the part of the building behind it, and then these two towers were added later. So this original tower was 1869, and then the other two towers were added in the 1870s. This was designed by Edward Townsend Mix, one of the most prominent local architects in the city. He also designed the Mitchell and Mackey buildings downtown, which are still there on the corner of Michigan and Water Streets. This building is also unique on the grounds in its architectural style. This is the Victorian Gothic style. You can see with these kind of tall arched windows and these different details. Whereas, excuse me, the rest of the buildings that we'll see have a slightly different style and were mostly designed by Henry Koch, who is another prominent architect and designed City Hall and a number of other buildings around Milwaukee. So this is, again, pre-renovation. So this building is currently getting restored, and I will get to that in a little bit. But this is kind of what it looked like prior to renovations. So you can see on the tower, it looks really dirty. There's actually netting here that's kind of holding the brick back from falling. Clearly, all the roof is not in great shape. And then one really interesting thing that was a fun surprise for me is that if you see this little, like, ugly, weird concrete box up here, this was built back in the 30s for the elevator shaft towers. And apparently, from what I was told by the developers, this elevator was one of the first in the state in a public building. So that's pretty neat. But unfortunately, it left this big box thing here. But when they restored the building and they were putting in new elevators, they're actually able to remove this thing. So when you go next time you're out there and take a look, it definitely, at least to me, I guess, those are the kind of things I wish I didn't notice sometimes. But people who are into preservation architecture, that's kind of our kryptonite, I suppose. So some other fun things about this building. This was a domiciliary, so essentially people just lived there and received care. It was meant to hold basically all of the functions of the Soldiers Home before the hospital and other buildings were built, including administrative offices. The first floor included the dispensary, which is essentially the drug store. There's the hospital, matron's room, a library, surgeon's room, and a sitting room for residents. And there was also a dining room in the rear of the building, which is actually where there was a roof collapse about 10 years ago. And that was kind of the whole reason that this building was considered to be demolished, and that kind of sparked everything. And then in the basement, there is a bathing room and the laundry room. So this is a view of the library. Old Main originally had a 500-bed capacity, essentially bunk beds, kind of dorm style. And the big building quickly became overcrowded, and in the late 1800s, it served as a living quarters for almost 1,000 veterans. And the end, as I mentioned earlier, the end towers were added 1876, and the 4 corner towers still retain all of their original iron cresting. So this is a shot of the dining area. The interior detailing and basic design of each room in Old Main remains pretty much the same as it was in 1869. They still have the original terrazzo floors in the corridors. There's still the skylights in the kitchen, plaster walls. It's not super ornate walking through it. There's little flourishes kind of at the top of these columns here, and some woodwork, but it's in terms of its architectural beauty, a lot, most of it is on the outside, and the inside is a little bit more utilitarian, but still has a lot of old charm to it. So when there was a multi-purpose layout and a grand structure that dominates the Soldiers Home landscape, the Old Main housed veterans up until 1989, and that's when veterans were moved to the newly remodeled hospital annex, which is a red brick building kind of on the southern end of the historic district. And this is one of the buildings that will, by next month, it will open for veterans once again. Again, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. This is the Ward Theater. So the Soldiers Home was meant to bring veterans together as a community, but it also brought the community to the veterans. So in many ways, the Ward Memorial Theater served this purpose. Ward Memorial Hall was constructed in 1881. It was named for Horatio Ward, who was an American baker, and created an endowment fund to construct memorial halls for soldiers' homes around the country. And the attempt was to provide the home's membership with the cultural activities such as concerts, theatrical performances, lectures, and just allow them to socialize and relax. And this building actually, before it was a theater, also functioned as a chapel. And on the rear of the building here, you can't really see, but that's where the Hank Aaron State Trail goes through. And when that was a railroad, there was actually a small train station in the rear of this building. So this was designed by Henry Koch. Again, Henry Koch is famous for Milwaukee City Hall, which is also a National Historic Landmark, as well as Turner Hall Ballroom and the Golden Mirror School, which is also a historic landmark. This was designed in the Richardsonian Romanesque architectural style that you can kind of see with these little flourishes around the arches and then this kind of checkered pattern at the top here. Cream City brick, of course. This exterior was actually completely restored about 2 or 3 years ago. And the VA did a really nice job getting that done. And so the roof was also replaced, and now it is sitting vacant, but it's completely buttoned up. There isn't any water getting in or anything like that. So it's just kind of awaiting a new use. So there's a shot of the side and then the interior. So the interior still has quite a bit of its original features, which is pretty cool. Here you can kind of see the theater boxes and the proscenium. I've heard that above these blue, I guess this artificial ceiling, that there's frescoes up there. I'm not sure. But hopefully at one point when this building's restored, they'll be able to uncover some additional features, which would be pretty cool. So this is from the back looking towards the stage. This is looking at all the seating, and another really, really cool thing about this building is that it actually has all of the original seats. So if you head to our Facebook page, we've posted a number of photos that show the details of the seats, but they actually have, in the leather backs of the seats, it says NSH for National Soldiers Home. And yeah, it's pretty remarkable that they're all still there. So here's a historic photo of what the kind of proscenium and the stage used to look like. Some of the famous artists that have performed here are Will Rogers, Bob Hope, and Milwaukee's own Liberace. In the 20s and 30s, they made enhancements that allowed for showing movies. And like many buildings in the Soldiers Home District, this building still contains many of its historical features, including the 1898 balconies and the stage. And there's actually still, behind the stage, up above, they still have all the counterweights and things that they used to use for plays, which is pretty neat. Also, definitely the most unique feature of this building is the stained glass window. So if you go to see the building today, it's been removed and it's in safekeeping for when the building reopens. But this is a pretty cool thing that was given to the Soldiers Home back in 1887 by the Grand Army of the Republic, which was, I guess, based in St. Louis. It was a gift from the people of St. Louis on behalf of the Grand Army Republic. So this is Ulysses Grant on a horseback. And you'll see in the next photo, it's kind of funny how they chose to affix it to the building. They clearly had to alter it, but it's a really neat just kind of depiction of him, and very, very colorful. And this was installed in 1887. So you can kind of see here, this is where that was cut out. I'm not sure why they didn't center it in the middle of this. It's kind of funny. So this is the Soldiers Home Chapel. This is the second of 3 buildings that's currently being studied for potential adaptive reuse, along with the theater and what's called the Governor's Mansion, which we'll see in a little bit. So part of the recuperation offered by the grounds of spiritual health, and the chapel, which was funded completely by private money, aided veterans in spiritual healing. This was designed by Henry Koch, and this is one of the few all-wood frame buildings on the grounds. This was designed in the Queen Anne style. So all these kind of intricate patterns on the wood shingles, and just the way these towers are, and the steeple and everything is very Queen Anne. It was built in the shape of a cross. Flowers for the altar came from the greenhouse on the Soldiers Home grounds. And located on the roof ridge west of the bell tower is the central steeple, which is much shorter and slimmer than the main steeple. That's kind of right here. And the central steeple was designed to complement the bell tower. In 1893, the people of Milwaukee donated the chapel's bell, which is still in the bell tower. And if you look up closely at this photo on the right here, you'll see the alternating patterns of the clapboard and the shingles. And this is pretty recent. I believe these photos were just taken this summer. So this is kind of the shape that it's in, which clearly we want to do something as soon as we can to make sure that the building doesn't further deteriorate. So inside the chapel, the architectural details are mostly pretty modest, but behind where the altar was is pretty, with these kind of stained glass windows here, and then each stained glass window that kind of lines the perimeter has these dedicatory inserts. So this one shows Milwaukee County, Racine, Kenosha, Wausau, and they just kind of honor people that had fought in the war. So that's a really just nice touch of the building that are all still intact. And this building actually hosted services and funerals for the cemetery up until 1996. And then at that point, all of the services were moved to the main chapel in this Milwaukee building. So, historic photo of the interior. So this church was multi-denominational. It was built in 1889. There were both Catholic and Protestant chaplains that were employed by the government to hold services and to visit hospitalized veterans. And there's actually 2 different homes that are still on the grounds where the chaplains lived. One of them is currently getting restored. I believe that's the Catholic chaplain's home is getting restored, and then the Protestant chaplain's home is just a short walk from there. This building was paid for with post funds, and essentially what those were profits from the operation of the Soldiers Home store. So they sold things like beer, they sold produce and other things that they grew on the Soldiers Home farm. And when they sold those, they were able to use those to build other buildings. These are some recent interior shots from this summer. So these pipes here for the organ are still there. I'm not sure what kind of shape they're in. If you were to try playing them, I'm sure they would need a lot of work, but they still look beautiful. Pretty remarkable that they're still in that good of shape. You can see that most of the ceiling up above the main area of the foyer has fallen out, but that can definitely be replaced with new plaster. But all of the structural integrity is still very sound, we're told. And it looks beat up, but it really is a beautiful building, and it's one building that we're really excited about. We think there's a lot of potential for a new use to go in here, whatever that may be. We of course wanted to be at the benefit of veterans and to complement the existing uses on the grounds. But we're curious to see what people will come up with once the new request for proposals is released. This is the old hospital building. And a critical part of the Soldiers Home is caring for, of course, ill or injured veterans. So this building was the first specifically designated as a hospital on the grounds. It was also designed by Henry Koch. And this shows some work that was done about 3 or 4 years ago. So if you look at the top here, you can see this brownish, brand new at the time, copper that was added to the roof. Excuse me. And then you can see the original iron crusting at the top. That's all original. They also added some flashing here. So all of that was done a number of years ago, and also they added some copper downspouts just as a kind of general maintenance on the building. And these are currently used as VA offices. I believe the HR department is in there, if I'm not mistaken. This building here was essentially the tuberculosis ward for the hospital. So all of the porches that surround this building were, the whole point of them was so that TB patients could get more fresh air. That was the thinking at the time. And so this building is also still in operation, I believe as offices, and was recently repainted. Here's another shot of the interior of the hospital. And this is the old administration building. So this building originally was meant to house a number of the kind of officers and directors of the Soldiers Home. So there was what's now called the director was formerly called the governor. So he had his offices here. There was actually a fire department that was located on the grounds, and the fire chief was based here. There was an old post office. So this was kind of the multi-function administration building up until the VA Zablocki building was built. This building was built in 1896. It's part of kind of a building boom that happened around that time, along with some other core buildings, including the hospitals. The exterior is, of course, again, Cream City brick. And this contained, as I mentioned, officers of the governor, also the treasurer, and then what was called the quartermaster, basically the guy in charge of all the horses. There was a print shop in the basement, and it served as the VA Center main office until 1942. So one of the part of this whole restoration project, there's 6 total buildings that are getting restored, and there's going to be 101 units of housing for veterans who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. So 80 of those units are going to be in Old Main, and 14 are going to be in this building here. So they're going to be single occupancy units. All of the housing will be permanent, so the veterans can live there as long as they want. It will be operated by the City of Milwaukee Housing Authority. And one kind of neat feature about this building that retains its original character is the post office is actually still intact in this kind of part down here. And that will be, I believe, a dining room. So that's getting restored. This is the old power plant. Definitely the most prominent of the old utility buildings, but unfortunately this one's currently slated for demolition. It hasn't been used since 1964. The entire grounds used to be powered by steam, and so that was powered by this plant, and there used to be steam tunnels that used to run throughout the grounds to heat all the buildings. So as I said earlier, most of these buildings are actually still in use, and a handful of the most important buildings and historic buildings on the grounds still are vacant though, and are in need of restoration. So through our work over the last few years, we're excited to report on some of the amazing progress that we've made in these buildings and some of the plans to address some of the others. So Bonnie, if you'd like to queue up the video here, I'll just say a couple things and then I'll turn it over to you to fire up the video. So the thing that really allowed this to happen, this entire restoration project, was kind of an esoteric government mechanism called an enhanced use lease. So what that does is allows the VA to retain ownership of the properties, but they are able to then turn the buildings over to a private developer. The developer takes on all of the risk of restoring the buildings, of operating them, of raising the funds to restore them. And the VA gets the benefit that they are able to still hold on to them. And it's a 75-year lease. And so it's kind of a win-win where the VA doesn't have to lose control of the buildings, but they are able to be restored. And so what ended up happening was the VA released a request for proposal and ended up selecting a team comprised of local partners. So the Alexander Company, they're based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and have a lot of experience in working in historic buildings nationally. They were selected as the lead developer. And then the City of Milwaukee Housing Authority was chosen to operate the buildings. And then the Center for Veterans Issues is also providing some of the support services for veterans. And so this video that I'll turn over here in a second will kind of give you some more details. So Bonnie?
All right. Fingers crossed for the technical things working.
Highest point of the ground. So everything on the grounds kind of focuses towards Old Main. You can really trace the entire history of veteran healthcare when you walk around the entire grounds of the Milwaukee Soldiers Home.
Peter, I'm going to pull you back in. It looks like we've got some audio issues on the feed.
Okay.
My apologies for that.
No problem. I can hear it when I can see you.
Right.
So I don't know if others were having issues with it synced up, but once you came back, it was working.
Let's see what it's doing. I also dropped the link in the chat for everyone, so you can check out the video on your own device.
The Milwaukee Preservation Alliance.
I think we might be frozen. Can you hear me, Bonnie? All right. I assume everyone can hear me. I'm not sure if we might have lost Bonnie. Wouldn't be a video call if things worked perfectly. It's just, we're all used to this now, right? So let's see if I can get my screen back up here.
Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties on my end.
No problem.
I think we're back.
Okay, I think we're back. All right. No, that's fine. Yeah, that's totally understandable. So yeah, if people want to watch the videos later, like Bonnie said, she'll send a link. Yeah, we'll do it that way.
The museum internet decided not to want to do video and stream. So
Totally
I will
fine.
turn it back over to you here, Peter. But real quick, there was a question about something kind of specific that you had mentioned that I wanted to throw your way. It came in, it was about radiators.
Oh.
And it was very specific, and so I wanted to throw it to you while it was still fresh in your mind, perhaps. This coming from Lisa Kransalb, who is a member of the Waukesha Preservation Alliance, asking about the radiators' location. Were they near the ceilings in the hospital? I think it was with the TB ward. Lisa, drop a clarification in the chat on that. But does that make sense to you, Peter?
Yeah, good question. I honestly don't know the answer. I could look that up and get back to you, but no, I'm not sure on that one.
All right, fair enough. I will turn it back over to you then.
All right. So this just kind of shows where each building that's being restored is, so kind of the project locations. So going back to that enhanced use lease that I was talking about, basically as a result of that arrangement, in a few short weeks, as I kind of teased earlier, Old Main is going to reopen as a part of the successful reuse and rehabilitation effort of returning the service to veterans. And we're just really, really thrilled that after literally almost a decade of work, advocacy work, and then fundraising and just kind of getting all the approvals, we're able to actually see this building that has been standing here for over 150 years now be restored and put back into the service of veterans. So we're just really, really thrilled about it. So in addition to that, this phase of work is also restoring a few of the additional buildings on campus. So that includes building 1 here that I mentioned, the administration building. There's gonna be 14 units in that building, 80 units in Old Main. I'm not sure if I mentioned that before. Another really cool component of the Old Main building is that there's actually going to be a separate women's wing that'll be secured only for female veterans. And there was a special fundraising component called 100 Extraordinary Women that raised actually over $300,000 from over 300 women who contributed to that cause. So we were really proud of that. There's also going to be a small museum that will be included in the building. And yeah, our organization is just really proud that we've played a role in making this incredible success possible. And by exploring these ideas with the VA, the National Park Service, State Historic Preservation Office, and others. And it was very collaborative from the very beginning. We formed what was called a Community Advisory Council, and that was comprised of local stakeholders, including a number of veterans groups who were consulted, and we met regularly with them. At one point, it was quarterly, just finding out what their needs are, finding out what how these buildings could serve them, and just to make sure that it's a project that's serving the needs that exist currently. So this is kind of some restoration going on in the summer. This would be kind of in the rear of Old Main and what used to be the dining hall. This work is done by J.P. Cullen. So this slide, there would be another video here, but we won't show that tonight. But again, Bonnie will send the link in the chat if you guys want to watch it later. It just kind of gives some cool interior shots of the building that we did this summer, and talks about the restoration efforts behind this building. So MPA, we recently engaged a team of historic preservation consultants to develop some recommendations for the adaptive reuse of this building, as well as the chapel and the governor's mansion. The team is led by a group called Miller Dunwoody, and it also includes Alum Architects, the Alexander Company, and JP Cullen, who are on the current Soldiers Home project. Also, Nisley Environmental Consultants. They're creating a study report that will explore new uses and funding for the vacant and endangered buildings. And the final report is expected early next year and will be used, or I should say, actually, now that it is this year, it'll be expected soon, and will be used to show the viability of the reuse. So as you can see, the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, we're very passionate about ensuring that these vacant buildings are restored specifically for the use of veterans, which was their original purpose. And since 2011, we've been helping to increase awareness of the Soldiers Home and support the VA and other partners to help take action to restore and return the district's buildings to the service of veterans. We've seen great success with Old Main and a number of the other buildings, and look forward to continued success with the Ward Memorial and other important buildings on the campus. People often ask how they can get involved, and the best thing right now is to really just help spread the word about these important community assets. We've been working to do that through our social media pages, our website, and you may have even seen today that a press release went out to a couple of publications that just promoted the pending RFP that will be coming out, the request for proposals, the study that we're working on to restore the 3 remaining prominent buildings on the grounds. So yeah, really, if you just word of mouth, tell your friends and your family that may be interested in this project to go to savethesoldiershome.com. That's where all of the updates get posted, as well as Save the Soldiers Home Facebook page and the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance Facebook page. There's also a really cool feature that Miller Communications helped us with a number of years ago. That was it's a free walking tour app that you can download to your smartphone. So this can be found on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and you can take your own self-guided tour at any time. You can walk around, and there's a narration that kind of at every stop along this map that's on the app will tell you the history behind the building. There's photos and I believe some video that gives some additional context. So that's definitely something I'd recommend checking out. Also, this sign here on the right, you may have noticed on I-94. So that was another early project that we got involved with, Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, before there was even a plan to restore the buildings. Once it was designated as a National Historic Landmark, we actually raised about $30,000 to install these signs on I-94 to let people know that they're there, and then also installed some signage along the Hank Aaron State Trail that we partnered with Friends of the Hank Aaron State Trail on. And if you're ever riding your bike down there and you stop next to the theater, you'll see one of the signs that will tell you some of the history. So our number one goal is to get the vacant buildings saved, but our biggest challenge right now is just to raise awareness of the Soldiers Home. So as I mentioned earlier, it's always remarkable to me how many people have lived in the area all their lives and never knew that we have this remarkable historic asset right in our own backyard. And we believe that if people hear the Soldiers Home story, they will also become passionate about its future, because it's just a really compelling thing to learn about, that this legacy of veteran healthcare is really right here in Milwaukee. So that's why we're out in the community talking about the Soldiers Home like we are tonight. We also work with our veterans and business and community leaders to urge the VA to take the necessary steps to return the district's vacant buildings to the service of veterans. And I believe Bonnie has some links that she's going to throw up on the screen here. One of them is for the restoration study that just recently came out at savethesoldiershome.com. There's also a survey that we just released that I believe she will also link to. And then there's also a donation page at savethesoldiershome.com/donate where you can contribute if you'd like.
I'm going to add myself back to the chat here.
Mm-hmm.
Dropped the link to the survey in the chat for everyone. That way they've got that hyperlink ready to go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Fabulous presentation. Lots and lots of comments. We'll try and get through as many of the fantastic questions as we can.
Okay.
And more avenues to find more information about the work that you all are doing. The social media aspect of it does make a difference. It's a great way to help spread the word amongst folks' networks. So please do follow them on those. I'm also going to add to this stream another voice of knowledge about the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. Jeremy here, who is the executive director with Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. And Peter, I know you already said kind of what can people do to support the work that you all are doing. I also wanted to pull up Cindy's comment that she can see how beautiful it will be as it is restored. She works with Habitat for Humanity, and Love Building any chance they can volunteer. So when it does come to the work that is being done, the sweat equity labor, are there volunteer efforts helping to support that? Is that largely being handled by some of the contractors you mentioned, or is there a volunteer opportunity for some sweat equity?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is I wish there were. Honestly, all of the physical labor is being done by contractors. So there aren't currently opportunities to do actual building. Really, the most direct way, other than letting people know right now, is if you would like to make a financial contribution. But yeah, unfortunately, currently there's not kind of building opportunity projects.
Well, and I know from our restoration project, it was difficult to incorporate labor support when it came to working alongside the trades and things. We did recruit some folks for moving of historic objects and archives, though, along the way.
Okay.
There was, though, I know that you all do have volunteer educators. And I know Gregory asked this question about giving walking tours of the grounds in the summertime, or what the access to the grounds are right now. Yeah.
So we do. That's actually something that is one of our goals as an organization, is to do more regular tours there. The last several years, the only real regular tours we've had are doors open, which is great, but also kind of sells out every year.
About that. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So and it doesn't sell out and is in we're making money on it. It's all free, but there's only a certain number of tickets, unfortunately, and so that one's always really popular. And then we do one for what's called the Osher Institute from UW-Milwaukee, which is it's called Osher Lifelong Learning. It's for retired individuals to kind of go on tours and things like that. Other than that, we haven't really done regular tours, in part because we actually, I've led most of the tours. We have another member from MPA, Jackie Jecka, who's really excellent at giving tours. John Rothy, our vice president, has given tours. But we actually need more volunteers to give them. And that would actually be a great way, if anyone does like giving tours and would like to get involved. I'd be happy to train you, but currently we don't have just a regular, you can go to this website and sign up for a tour kind of thing. So it's something we want to work on this year.
Future program opportunities.
Yep.
Nice.
When it's not negative 10 degrees out.
We'll just an extra layer and a couple.
Once we get through second winter,
right.
then we can talk about it.
Yeah. No such thing as warm or cold weather, right? Just cold clothing.
Yep.
A comment here from John Shacknecht, who is one of my board members here in Waukesha, local historian, avid biker. So asking about when he rides his bike past the theater, the windows seem to be single pane glass. Is that the case?
I think all the windows are still original, so I'm sure it is the case. They haven't ripped the windows out yet, which is great. And actually, one of the great things that it was designated as a National Historic Landmark is it puts protections on those.
Nice.
We could get into windows, really. That could be a whole topic of conversation, just how, kind of the conventional wisdom is, oh, you need to replace them because they're inefficient. But really, old windows were made to be restored. They weren't made to be, thrown out after 30 years. And so a lot of those old windows, even though they're single pane, they can be retrofitted and resealed and actually can be very efficient. But yeah, to answer your question, I believe they are all of the original single pane.
And as somebody who has some original homes in an old house, yes, reseal, give them love. They are very, very durable and made to last.
Yep.
And so often where older buildings, the kind of window placements and things are very deliberate so that the building does work more efficiently.
Yep.
Right. So they're a huge asset to a structure.
Yeah. And I guess quick interjection there is if there is anyone on this video chat that is interested in restoring their old windows, if they have an old home and they're just not sure what to do, please reach out to me or Jeremy, because we're kind of trying to compile a resource where we understand, or we've learned that even if you want to do the right thing, restore these things, it's hard to sometimes find a contractor who does the work. And so we're trying to compile resources so that we can have, if anyone wants to do the work, that there is an actual list of people that have experience in this. So we'd be happy to help out if you reach out to Jeremy or
I might be sending you an email later. Speaking of windows, though, Beth Ann had a question with regard to the theater stained glass window. Do we know who the artist of that window is, or who made that stained glass window?
Hey, Beth. She used to be on our board.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest with you. I just know that I think there was 4 of them created. So it's pretty unique. I don't know where the others went, but I can't answer the question about who created it. I should know that, but I don't.
I was going to say we've got a couple of stained glass fanlight windows in the old courthouse portion of our complex, and we have not yet found the record somewhere that says here is who designed it.
Yeah. I don't think it's a Tiffany, but we'll try to find it out.
About Tiffany glass, though, I believe, if I could find it again. A couple of the kind of technical questions, like the radiator question. Somebody also was inquiring, as the buildings are being restored. Here we are, Gregory asking about water sprinkler systems, or what systems will be put in place to make sure they're up to code buildings, as it were.
Yep. All that's handled through the contractor. They have to get all the approvals through the state and through the city, just like any other new building project would. So if you think about it as just kind of like a regular apartment building that's getting built, it would follow the exact same guidelines. Everything for Americans with Disabilities Act compliancy, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I know. Again, we had similar conversations. We did get some clearances on things like staircases that were not enclosed staircases, and there are some adaptations to make sure you're not impacting the historic fabric of the space, that you're honoring things like original staircases and original hallways, so that you're not kind of breaking up in the way that was done so often as they were subdivided into offices and things, and you suddenly have walls that don't need to be there.
Right. Well, what's nice about this building is, since it was originally, it's kind of going back to its original use. So it didn't really have the issues of rooms being broken up in weird ways and things like that. I think they probably, if anything, would have added more walls because of it was like kind of more just big open spaces for kind of the dorm style rooms, but they didn't have to kind of like re-engineer where hallways were in and that kind of stuff.
That's nice. All right. I want to pull up one comment here, not question, but from Patty, thanking for the presentation, and also they worked in the hospital during the Vietnam War and were unaware of the history.
Oh, wow.
And I would say that's not unusual, where you've got folks who spent years working in these historic structures, and their stories weren't being told, especially in the context of it's an active, hospital. Your nose to the ground in the day to day. So to be able to tell these stories and make them known is so powerful and helps connect people with places that they know so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also very understandable. I mean, if you're, I think anyone who's working in the main Zablocki building, it really kind of feels like it's the Soldiers Home's its own little world up there, because you're not probably going to go up there too much. So, if you're not kind of like driving around those buildings much, it's definitely easy to not really think about. So, that's what we try to do, is just kind of let people know what's going on.
Nice. Oh, Cindy, who had asked earlier about volunteering, is now offering for landscaping. So I think we're in connection with Cindy for some volunteer opportunities and support.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Like I said, unfortunately there aren't currently opportunities for kind of manual labor like that. But if at any point down the road there is, we will definitely put notices out about that and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, we have gone a bit past the hour. If your question or comment did not get answered, please reach out to any of us, all of us. You can find me at Waukesha County Historic Society and Museum, wchsm.org. Also find ways to support us and our work there. You can also check out the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, their web address there across the screen. And for both of our organizations, we are focused on serving our community, and we rely on you all watching our community for our support. We are membership-based. We are supported through direct community contributions. Neither of us have guaranteed funding by any measure. So we create programs like this in order to help share the work that we're doing and get you all more involved in the work that we're doing. As Peter said a couple of times, talking about historic preservation work in the community, the relevance of history in the community is really valuable, so that it's not just in the moment I'm hearing about these things. When it becomes part of all of our conversations, it becomes a value that we all share and can be proud of. And the Soldiers Home project is an absolutely incredible achievement to be this far in. There's plenty of work still to be done, but it's a really, really ambitious project that I think will be a huge asset for the community.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Bonnie, for hosting us. We really appreciate being able to just be a part of this and to let more people know about what's going on there. So, once it gets warmer out, again, I'd encourage you to just take a stroll through the grounds, ride your bike down the Hank Aaron, and just kind of take in all the history. It's pretty neat.
Absolutely. Here's looking forward to seeing everybody outside on the trails.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys.
Everyone.
And please do fill out the survey that Bonnie put in the. Yes. That survey is just very short, only about 5 minutes, probably to do the whole thing. It's really 2 questions. But yeah, that's a great opportunity to share your voice about what kind of uses you think might be valuable in the theater, chapel, and the governor's mansion. That's just available this week. So don't delay too long.
Yes. In the chat again. So make sure to fill that out.
Thanks so much, Bonnie.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you all next time.